From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics Now for Friday, February 7th. Before she became governor, Tina Kotek was something of a climate warrior. She spent nearly a decade as Oregon's House Speaker, passing major bills that have really shaped Oregon's response to the threat of climate change. But as governor, Kotek spends most of her time on a smaller set of issues. Climate change is plainly not at the top of the list as Oregon faces crises on housing, schools, and healthcare. Today, we're going to talk about Kotek's climate legacy as governor a little more than halfway through her first term. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk VanderHart.
I'm Monica Samayoa, climate reporter.
Monica, as you just said, you cover climate. It is great to have you for the first time on Politics Now.
Thank you.
As I understand it, you've had a long-standing request to sit down with Governor Kotek about her climate agenda that was only just recently granted. Why did you want to talk to her?
Actually, I've been wanting to talk to her for more than 2 years since she was running for governor because I really wanted to know what her climate agenda would be for the state. During her campaign, her team kept calling her a climate champion, and that was also something she repeated when I sat down with her.
I've been a climate champion for years. We've passed really significant pieces of legislation, both programmatically and target-wise, of where we want to be as a state to do our part to fight climate change. And one of the reasons I ran for governor was to make sure we could fulfill all the things we've put in place.
But I remember at the time there wasn't much information on what her climate agenda would be as governor, and that was really the main reason why I wanted to talk with her. So when the time came and she announced what her top priorities would be, climate wasn't one of them. And that worried some folks from the environmental and climate sectors that kept hearing, she's a champion for climate, but yet it wasn't an opportunity. So during her first year, groups were really hoping to see what her climate agenda would be for the state. They wanted more on climate action. And we did see that during the legislative session that year, but folks really wanted Kotek to be a leader on climate. And they felt like they said they felt like it was being put on the back burner.
Yeah, I mean, we saw things like the governor, a bill relaxing land use laws, for instance, to make way for semiconductors. Probably not that big of a priority for environmental folks. She wanted to relax land use laws for housing, something that some environmental interests opposed. I think there was a real sense that, yes, the governor has these big three things, and in some cases when those cross the climate agenda, she's not really standing up for those climate values. At least that's what I heard. I know you heard a lot more. But before we get to the specifics of the really involved chat you had with the governor, what was her basic response to this notion that she has sort of been ignoring or not paying attention, at least in the way she had, to climate as the way she had as the House Speaker?
I'm going to let her answer that herself.
I think they have the wrong impression of what my commitment is. I really believe that Oregon and the United States has to do more to fight climate change. For me, it's a personal faith issue that we have to be good stewards of the land. And that is what has driven me over the years to say, let's set really ambitious targets, let's put programs in place.
But I also want people to hear something else she shared with me, her climate mantra.
My mantra on climate action has always been, we have to do all of it. And if there's a good idea out there that's something we need to pursue, I am open to it. And if something is proving not to be having as much success as we want, we need to change it to something else. I think we have to adapt.
So despite climate action not being listed as one of her top priorities, she said Oregon needs to stay the course on what's been put in place and continue to implement those programs.
Yeah, and she's saying, I'm open to everything you send to me. I support it all. And in a way, though, if she's not giving it the energy that maybe some folks would like, I wonder how far that goes with them. One thing that is pretty much an obsession, I would say, in Salem right now is how orders coming down from the Trump administration or just more generally D.C. Republicans are going to impact the state. We could be talking tariffs or immigration crackdowns or pulling back Medicaid funding. There's a lot of worry to go around, I think. You wanted to know from Kotek how climate funding that Oregon has really been counting on, planning for from the feds might be impacted. What did she say?
Yeah, so a lot is happening in this space, and so far it's been really tricky to follow along with what's been happening nationally and what's happening in Oregon. So a little background. On day one, the Trump administration signed executive orders halting any federal funding that has to do with the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. Between the two, they provide billions of dollars toward climate action, and Oregon's already been granted hundreds of millions of dollars. So last year alone, the state was granted $285 million through 2 federal grants. And people were really excited about that because not only would the funds help create more climate projects and programs, it would also help boost current programs like the electric vehicle rebate program that's been running out of funding within months of being open. So I want to make it clear that this executive order is different from the executive order that halted federal funding for payments, grants, and other federal programs. The executive order to halt money for climate action is still active. And when I checked in with our State Department of Energy, like, hey, what's going on? It's not clear if payments or money are flowing into the state. So here's what Kotek said when I asked her about it.
Well, right now, I believe the federal government has made a promise that has obligated those dollars, and many of those are on reimbursement basis. So we spend the money and get reimbursed. I'm working under the goal that those things are still in place until we hear otherwise.
But if we do hear otherwise and they are halted?
Well, we'll have to come back and recalibrate and say, well, which funding stream it might be reduced? What is that going to do to us hitting our emission reduction goals? What do we pivot to? Can we put more state dollars in? The good thing is we meet every year as a legislature so people can come in and talk about additional resources.
So if that does happen, that means that that might be some money being cut from some programs or sending more state dollars into the other climate programs.
Yeah, we don't know how much yet the state has to play with. You know, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are really worried that Medicaid funding could be cut. That will almost certainly be a priority to backfill at least some of. So, you know, where climate funds go or general funds that need to replace some of this federal funding that we might lose, I mean, that's going to be a very interesting and tough question if it comes down to that later in the session. Another thing you asked Kotek about was surging utility rates. Why was this? I mean, I probably know, but I should ask, why was this high on your list of questions?
Well, rising utility rates have been an issue for a lot of Oregonians across the state, especially for the past 5 years. So since 2020, energy rates have increased at least 50% at some of Oregon's biggest electric companies, and that's impacting a lot of people. I've heard from environmental and climate justice groups that have told me people are really struggling to pay their energy bills among all the other things that we have to pay for. For example, I've been told people are having to decide whether to pay their energy bill or pay the internet, transportation, groceries. It's even gotten as far as medication. So people are really struggling. And I wanted to ask about that because I felt like this is an issue that's at the top of a lot of people's minds.
Definitely something we are hearing a lot about. Does the governor have any brilliant plans for addressing this problem?
In short, she said the state can do something to make bills more affordable. So she talked about things already happening with rising rates, like how community groups are now included in conversations with the Public Utility Commission, that's who regulates utilities, to help bring these community voices and experiences to the PUC. She also told me the PUC's working on creating programs to protect low-income households from high rate increases. And those are the discount programs that utilities offer to households to kind of help, based on their income to help. But she mostly talked about data centers.
And I've seen all the stories about we have commercial users, mostly data centers, taking up a lot of energy, and people feeling like the residential ratepayers are subsidizing the commercial ratepayers.
So she may be referring to a letter Portland General Electric sent to U.S. Senator Ron Wyden late last year about rising rates. In that letter, PGE said that one of the reasons why there is an increase in rates is due to the rise of data centers across the state. And that's because data centers use large amounts of power to do what they need to do. And, well, that's impacting residential ratepayers. So she told me she's looking forward to a bill that would require data centers or big commercial users to pay their fair share.
We have to manage for affordability, and I think everyone believes in the idea that, you know, you pay your fair share based on what you're using. And I've talked to a lot of the big data center folks who they're very committed to reducing their carbon footprint, bringing in renewable energy. They just need to step it up and do even more.
So she's hoping the bill makes its way through the legislature.
Yeah, something we've seen get attention already this year, this question of data centers and their growth here and how much power they're taking, I think definitely has a lot of people's attention in the Capitol. Pivot real quick. Monica, last year, I remember you going to the South Coast and you were looking in to the build up to what everyone expected would be Oregon's sort of first foray into floating offshore wind power. There was all this excitement and promise, but also worry, I think. And that got very close to becoming a thing, and then it sort of got scrapped at the last minute. Remind us how that worked.
Yeah, that was an interesting turn of events in a very short amount of time. I think that there are many factors why that contributed to this decision to halt the federal lease auction weeks before it was set to happen. I talked to a lot of folks about this for more than a year and a half, and one of the biggest concerns I heard from local residents was, what are the environmental and economic impacts of building these wind turbines on the southern coast? What would those be? Others talked about how the process was just moving too quickly and that there needed to be a plan in place if it turned out the floating turbines just wouldn't work out. Other concerns included the technology wasn't advanced enough. I haven't even mentioned that the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians filed a lawsuit with the intent to delay the auction, or the mounting local opposition about it, or the fact that only 1 out of the 5 developers were still interested in placing a bid. So it was just so much happening. And that ended up with like, okay, maybe we do need to pause this.
Yeah, there was a lot working against this at the end there, I suppose. You asked Kotek about it, and you know where that failure last year leaves Oregon, as really we and a lot of other states are looking to ramp up our alternative energy sources. How is she looking at it?
At a high level, she says we still need it.
We really could use that extra option for new renewable energy, and I think we should continue to pursue it.
So for Oregon to meet its greenhouse gas emission goals, we need more and diverse renewable energy sources other than, wind and solar or onshore wind. So Kotek recognizes that.
We have to have different options. And I do think wind's a viable way to go. But the community has to want it. We have to understand what it means.
So now that the auction is on an indefinite pause, that gives the state time to finish working on a roadmap. And this is something lawmakers passed last year. And basically, it's going to develop standards or guidelines for how offshore wind should be approved or developed. It would also include input from a lot of different agencies and people that participate in this, and also the local community, which I think is something that many people in that region wanted. Kotek also told me that she hopes that in this process will help answer a lot of questions that people had and know what questions they will need to ask if and when a new lease opportunity presents itself. And that's a big if and when, because the Trump administration also halted offshore wind lease sales. Despite that, Kotek also talked about building a West Coast infrastructure hub that will help with getting all the materials needed to build the turbines on the West Coast. But I did ask her whether Oregon could see this happen by 2030, which it was originally, the state was originally aiming for this. And, well, she said 2035 seems more likely.
Last question, Monica. Have you heard from environmental advocates since publishing a story about Kotek's comments, offering some of this coverage? I mean, hearing her explanations, do you get the sense that they are happy with where she's at? Are they still left wanting more and hoping she makes it more of a priority? I don't know. What are you hearing?
I've heard from one environmental group that said, despite her answers being a bit vague, they said there were some interesting nuggets in her answers.
And we should note, the governor gave a state of the state speech last month. She hammered the same things that she has always hammered since she's been governor: housing, behavioral health, education, less talk of climate change. So I think that is a pretty clear signal that her priorities are remaining where they are. But very, very interesting context. Monica, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will leave it there for today.
Thank you.
This week's episode was produced by Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Naleen Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. And if you've got questions for us, we want to hear them. Drop us a line at opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.